I'm Ariana, 32 female. I'm a freelance graphic designer, and for the last 8 years, I've shared my life, my home, and my heart with my husband, Julian. We lived in a beautiful modern home that he himself had designed, a testament to his rising career as a brilliant architect. But just when I thought our foundation was solid, he asked for a little space to strengthen our marriage, and in doing so, handed me the very tools I would need to tear his world down. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our love story was one for the modern storybooks. We met in a crowded coffee shop, a complete cliché. I was sketching in my notebook, struggling with a logo design for a client, and he, after accidentally bumping my table and making me smudge a line, offered to buy me a new coffee as an apology. He had this easy, disarming charm that could coax a smile out of a statue. His eyes, the color of warm honey, held a spark of genuine curiosity. He wasn't just looking at me, he was seeing me. He asked about my art, about the principles of design, and listened with an intensity that made me feel like the most fascinating person in the world. He was an architect, he explained, a builder of dreams. That day, he told me he wanted to build a life with the same principles he applied to his work, with a strong foundation, impeccable design, and a view that was worth every challenge. I was, admittedly, completely swept off my feet. Our courtship was a whirlwind of art gallery openings, late-night discussions about aesthetics and form, and exploring the city's hidden architectural gems. Julian had a vision for everything, especially our future. He wasn't just ambitious, he was driven by a burning need to create things that would last, things that had meaning. I admired that. As a graphic designer, I lived in a world of pixels and transient trends, but he built things with steel, glass, and stone. He built forever. 3 years later, we were married in the sun-drenched courtyard of a restored historical building he had consulted on. Our vows were not just promises, they were blueprints. We promised to be each other's support beam, to fill our shared spaces with light and laughter, and to design a life that was both beautiful and functional. And for a long time, we did. I built my freelance career from a sunlit studio in our home, while he climbed the ladder at a prestigious architectural firm, Starkwell and Associates. Our home was his masterpiece. It was a minimalist structure of clean lines, vast windows, and an open-concept living space that was perfect for hosting. We threw dinner parties where Julian would hold court, captivating our friends and his colleagues with stories of his projects, his inspirations, and his grand plans. I was the proud wife, the co-host, making sure everyone's glass was full, my hand resting on the small of his back as he spoke. I saw the admiration in people's eyes when they looked at him, and the envy when they looked at us. We were the perfect couple, a seamless fusion of art and structure. I designed our invitations, our holiday cards, the website for his personal portfolio. We were a team, a brand, J&A. I remember one evening, about a year before everything fell apart. We were sitting on our patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and violet. Julian had just won a major contract, a high-profile community arts center that would be his biggest project to date. He was ecstatic, buzzing with creative energy. He wrapped his arm around me, pulling me close. "This is it, Ari," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "This project is going to define me, but you. You define my life." He kissed my forehead, and in that moment, I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost tangible. This was my forever. The foundation was solid. The design was flawless. Looking back, the warning signs were there, but they were as subtle as hairline fractures in a wall. You don't see them until you're looking for them. There was the way his phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now always in his pocket or face down beside him. There were the late nights at the office that became more and more frequent, which I attributed to the immense pressure of the new Arts Center project. He would come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, and when I'd ask, he'd laugh it off. "Oh, that's probably Serafina," he'd say with an easy shrug. "The interior designer on the project. She basically bathes in that stuff. Talented, but a bit much." He mentioned her name a few times, Serafina. He painted her as a young, overly eager, but brilliant designer who was essential to the project's success. He spoke of her with a hint of professional annoyance that, in hindsight, was the perfect cover. "She's constantly challenging my structural choices for her aesthetic whims," he'd complain, rolling his eyes. "We were arguing about the atrium lighting for 2 hours today." It all sounded so plausible, so normal. I felt a pang of sympathy for my hardworking husband dealing with a difficult colleague. I was his cheerleader, his sanctuary. I'd have dinner waiting for him, no matter how late he came home. I'd listen to him vent about zoning laws and budget constraints, rubbing his shoulders while he'd sketch out new ideas on a napkin. I was so focused on supporting his dream that I failed to see that he was building a whole separate life, one where I was not part of the design. The promise of forever we had made was becoming a one-sided contract, and I was the only one still honoring the terms. The perfect structure he had built was beginning to groan under the weight of his lies, and soon the first real crack was about to appear. The conversation happened on a Tuesday. It was a day like any other, gray and drizzling outside, a perfect day to stay inside with a warm cup of tea and my design tablet. I was working on a branding package for a new organic skincare line, feeling good about the progress I was making. Julian had been home for dinner the last 2 nights, a rare treat, and I was feeling a renewed sense of connection. I thought perhaps the intense phase of the Arts Center project was finally easing up. I was wrong. It was just the calm before the storm. He came into my studio around noon. He didn't knock, which was unusual. He always respected my creative space. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. It wasn't anger, not sadness, but a kind of weary resignation. "Hey," I said, smiling as I looked up from my screen. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Come to critique my font choices." He didn't return the smile. He just sighed, a deep, heavy sound that seemed to suck the warmth out of the room. "Ari, we need to talk." The 4 most dreaded words in the English language. My stomach did a slow, nervous flip. I swiveled in my chair to face him fully, my half-finished logo forgotten. "Okay," I said slowly. "Is everything all right?" He walked over to the window and stared out at the rain-streaked glass, his back to me. "I don't know. Lately, I feel like we're disconnected, like we're roommates, not husband and wife." The words stung, more so because I knew he wasn't entirely wrong. We had been living parallel lives, his consumed by work, mine by my own deadlines, and the effort of maintaining a home he was rarely in. But I thought that was a phase, a temporary sacrifice for his career, for our future. "I know things have been stressful with the project," I offered, my voice soft. "I thought we were just pushing through it together." "That's just it," he said, finally turning to face me. His eyes looked tired, shadowed. "I feel like I'm losing myself in the stress, and I'm losing us in the process. I look at you, and I love you so much, Ariana, but I feel distant. I feel like I'm not being the husband you deserve." This was not the accusation I was expecting. It was a confession, wrapped in a veneer of self-deprecation that was designed to make me feel sorry for him. It worked. My defensiveness softened, replaced by a wave of concern. I stood up and walked toward him, placing a hand on his arm. "Julian, what are you saying?" He took my hands in his grip firm. "I think I need some time, some space. Not a separation," he added quickly, seeing the panic flash in my eyes. "No, never that, but maybe I need to stay at the downtown apartment the firm keeps for a few weeks, just to clear my head. To focus on finishing this project without bringing all the stress home to you. To remember who I am so I can be a better partner. I want to come back to you, to us, stronger. I want to fight for this marriage." The logic was twisted, almost nonsensical. To get closer, he needed to move further away. To strengthen our marriage, he needed to physically leave it. It felt wrong, like a puzzle piece being forced into the wrong spot. Every instinct in my body screamed, "No, this is not how you fix things. You fix things by talking, by spending more time together, not less." But then I looked at his face, at the earnest plea in his eyes. He looked so tormented, so genuinely conflicted. He was a man who solved problems with plans and structures. This was his solution, his blueprint for fixing a flaw in our relationship. He was framing it as a noble sacrifice he was making for me, for us. How could I argue with that without sounding selfish and unsupportive? "You want to move out," I whispered, the words feeling foreign and ugly in my mouth. "Temporarily," he insisted. "Think of it as a strategic retreat, so I can come back and we can rebuild. I feel like if we keep going like this, we're just going to burn out. I don't want to resent you, and I don't want you to resent me. I'm asking you to trust me, Ari." Trust him, that was the cornerstone of our entire relationship. I had always trusted him, implicitly. I trusted his vision, his ambition, his love. To deny him that trust now felt like a betrayal in itself. Maybe he was right. Maybe the pressure had become an unbearable weight on our marriage, and this was the only way to release it before it crushed us completely. So, against my better judgment, against the screaming siren in my gut, I agreed. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "If you really think this will help, okay." The relief that washed over his face was instantaneous and so profound it almost made me sick. It wasn't the relief of a man who had just saved his marriage. It was the relief of a man who had just gotten away with something. He pulled me into a hug, burying his face in my hair. "Thank you," he murmured. "You won't regret this. I'm doing this for us, I promise." That night he packed a bag. It was surreal, watching him move through our bedroom, our shared space, selecting shirts and suits. He was efficient, clinical. He packed his toiletries, his laptop, and a framed photo of the two of us from our wedding day, which he placed carefully amongst his clothes. It was a masterful touch, a piece of performance art designed to reassure me. "See, I'm taking you with me." When he left, he kissed me at the door. It was a chaste, almost formal kiss. "I'll call you every day," he said. "I love you." "I love you too," I replied to the closing door. The silence he left behind was deafening. The house, his architectural marvel, suddenly felt vast and empty, like a museum after closing hours. I walked through the rooms, touching the cool, minimalist surfaces, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the thermostat. He said he needed to find himself to strengthen our marriage. It was a beautiful, noble lie, and I had bought it completely. I had given him my trust, and he had walked out the door with it, on his way to a life I knew nothing about. The first major crack had appeared, and the entire structure was about to come crashing down. The day after Julian left was disorienting. I woke up to an empty space beside me in bed, the sheets cold. The silence in the house was a physical presence, pressing in on me. I tried to work, to lose myself in the clean, predictable world of vector lines and color palettes, but my focus was shattered. Every notification on my phone made my heart leap, hoping it was him. He did call, just as he promised. The conversation was brief, stilted. He said he was at the firm's apartment, that it was sterile and lonely, and that he missed me already. He told me he was heading into a long day of meetings with the Arts Center committee. Every word was carefully chosen, another brick in the wall he was building around his deception. I hung up feeling a strange mix of reassurance and unease. That evening, I decided I needed a distraction, something to numb the gnawing anxiety in my stomach. I made a cup of tea, curled up on the sofa, our sofa, and started mindlessly scrolling through social media. It was the usual feed of baby photos, vacation brags, and political arguments. It was mundane, normal, and for a few minutes, it worked. It made me feel connected to a world that was still spinning on its axis, even if mine had wobbled. That's when I saw it. It wasn't on the page of anyone I knew personally. A local lifestyle blogger I followed had attended the grand opening of a new art gallery downtown the previous night. She had posted a carousel of images to her public profile. An amazing night celebrating art and artists at the new at Gallery Noir opening. Such a stunning space and even more stunning people. The caption read. The first few photos were of the art, the crowd, the champagne. I swiped left, left again, my thumb moving on autopilot. And then I stopped, my breath caught in my throat, my heart didn't just leap, it seized. The photo was a candid shot, slightly blurry, taken from across the room. It captured a laughing group of people, but my eyes zeroed in on two figures at the center. It was Julian. He was dressed in a sharp, dark suit I'd bought him for his birthday. He looked happy, relaxed, more carefree than I had seen him in months, and his arm was wrapped tightly, possessively, around a woman's waist. Her back was mostly to the camera, but she was leaning into him, her head tilted back in laughter, her hand resting familiarly on his chest. It wasn't a colleague pose. It was intimate, proprietary. The woman was wearing a slinky, emerald green dress. Long, dark hair cascaded down her back. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. It was a glitch, a mistake. It must be someone who looked like Julian. But I knew his posture, the way he tilted his head when he laughed. It was him. The man who was supposed to be alone in a sterile apartment, clearing his head for. The sake of our marriage was at a glamorous party, holding another woman like she was the center of his universe. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to put my phone down and take a deep, shuddering breath. The air felt thick, unbreathable. I picked up the phone again, my hand trembling so badly I could barely hold it steady. I zoomed in on the photo. The quality degraded, the pixels breaking apart, but the truth of it remained sharp and painful. My husband, with another woman, last night, while I was at home, sick with worry, trusting him. My mind raced back to his phone call. Long day of meetings with the Arts Center committee. A lie, all of it. The weary voice, the talk of missing me, it was all a performance. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. Serafina, the interior designer, the one who bathed in perfume and argued about lighting. I went to the search bar, my fingers stiff and clumsy, and typed her name. Her profile was public. The first thing I saw was her profile picture. It was a professional headshot, and she was stunning. Young, so much younger than me, with large, dark eyes, full lips, and an air of confident ambition. She was exactly the type of woman who would wear an emerald green dress. I scrolled through her feed. It was a curated collection of design projects, exotic travel, and expensive dinners. It was the life of a successful, single woman, or so it seemed. I kept scrolling, going back weeks, then months. I noticed Julian's name liking almost every single post. Then I found it, a post from 3 weeks ago. A picture of 2 champagne flutes, hands clasped over a table at a restaurant I knew was ridiculously expensive. The caption was simple, "To new designs and even newer beginnings." Her nails were painted a deep crimson. I recognized the watch on the man's wrist. It was a vintage Omega I had saved up to buy for Julian on our 5th anniversary. The breath I was holding escaped in a ragged sob. It wasn't just a picture. It was a timeline, a story that had been happening right under my nose in parallel to the one I thought I was living. The late nights, the vague excuses, the work stress, it all clicked into place, each piece a new, searing betrayal. He hadn't asked for space to fix our marriage. He had asked for space to audition my replacement. He didn't move out to find himself. He moved in with her, or at least created the freedom to be with her without the inconvenience of a wife at home. The downtown apartment was a lie. The whole thing was a lie. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked to the bathroom. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I saw a fool. A trusting, naive fool who had been so busy supporting her husband's dreams that she never once thought he might be using them as a smokescreen to build a new life with someone else. The woman staring back at me was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and a pain so profound it felt physical. But as I stood there, watching a single tear trace a path down my cheek, something else began to bubble up from beneath the grief. It was a slow-burning, icy rage. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had manipulated me. He had used my love and my trust as tools for his deception. He had made me a willing accomplice in my own humiliation. The picture had been worth 1,000 lies, but it had also given me one singular truth. My marriage wasn't cracking. It was already a pile of rubble, and my husband, the master architect, had designed its demolition himself. In that moment, staring at my own devastated face, I made a new promise. I would not be the victim in his story. I would not crumble. If he could build a world of lies, I would build a plan for justice. And I would start by gathering every single piece of evidence I could find. The first 24 hours after seeing the photo were a blur of shock and grief. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark. The image of Julian and Serafina burned into my mind, replaying every conversation, every excuse, every lie from the past year. Each memory was now tainted, recontextualized into a fresh betrayal. The pain was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. But by the second day, the grief began to recede, leaving behind something harder, sharper, cold, calculated anger. He had underestimated me. He had counted on me being the quiet, supportive, trusting wife. He never imagined I would become an investigator. My first call was to Isabel. She was my best friend since college, a high school history teacher with a no-nonsense attitude and a fiercely loyal heart. I called her before school, my voice cracking as I tried to explain what I'd found. "Ari, what's wrong? You sound awful," she said, her voice immediately shifting from cheerful morning chatter to serious concern. Through choked sobs, I told her everything. The conversation with Julian, his request for space, the downtown apartment, and finally, the picture. I.S. Ent it to her, there was a long silence on her end. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and furious. "That absolute snake, I never liked him, you know. He was always too smooth, too polished." She paused. "Okay, cry, you get to cry today. Scream, break a plate, do whatever you need to do. But tomorrow we get smart. Tomorrow we gather ammunition." Her words were a lifeline. She didn't just offer sympathy, she offered a strategy. It was exactly what I needed. I spent the rest of the day purging the initial shock from my system. The next morning, I woke up with a singular purpose. Isabel was right. It was time to get smart. Julian was an architect. He believed in plans, details, and evidence. I would beat him at his own game. I would build a case against him so solid, so irrefutable, that his entire world of lies would collapse under its weight. My investigation started with our finances. For years, Julian had handled the bulk of our money. He said he was better with numbers, and I, happy to focus on my creative work, had let him. It was another area of my life I had blindly trusted him with. I logged into our shared bank accounts and credit card statements. He had his own business credit card from Starkwell and Associates, which I couldn't see, but our personal accounts were a treasure trove. He was right about one thing: he was meticulous. Most of his spending was disguised, but I was a designer. I lived and breathed details. I noticed patterns. There were dozens of charges at high-end restaurants I had never been to, listed under client dinner. But they were always for two people, and always on nights he was supposedly working late alone. There were charges for floral arrangements from a boutique florist, not for me, sent to an address I didn't recognize. A quick search showed it was a high-end condo building in the city's trendiest district, Serafina's district. Then I found the hotel charges. Not just one, but several over the past 6 months. They were from boutique hotels in nearby towns, perfect for a weekend getaway. The charges were always followed a day or two later by a corresponding credit, a reimbursement from his firm, making the transaction look like a legitimate business expense. He was using company money to fund his affair and then getting reimbursed for it, effectively making his firm pay for his infidelity. The audacity was breathtaking. I downloaded every statement, highlighting each suspicious charge, saving them to a password-protected folder on a new, clean USB drive. Next was social media. Serafina's public profile was a goldmine, but I had to be careful. I couldn't risk liking something or viewing her stories from my own account. I created a completely anonymous profile using a VPN to mask my location. I chose a generic name and a stock photo of a sunset. From this safe distance, I became an archaeologist of their affair. Serafina was arrogant. She loved to flaunt her life, and by extension, her relationship with Julian, even if she never used his name. She posted photos of gifts, a delicate diamond necklace with the caption, "He just gets me," and a first edition copy of a rare architectural book I knew Julian had been searching for years. She posted pictures from those same boutique hotels, geotagging the location with captions like, "A much-needed escape." I cross-referenced the dates with our credit card statements, They were perfect matches. I used my graphic design software to enhance photos, clarifying reflections in windows or sunglasses. In one of her posts, a selfie of her drinking wine on a balcony, I zoomed into the reflection in her wine glass. It was distorted, but I could make out the faint, unmistakable silhouette of a man holding the phone to take the picture. It was Julian's silhouette. The biggest breakthrough came from a place I least expected. Julian had always been obsessed with fitness and technology. He had a top-of-the-line fitness watch that synced with a family-sharing app so we could motivate each other. He hadn't used it much with me lately, but he had forgotten to disable the location-sharing feature. I opened the app, my heart pounding. His location wasn't at the firm's downtown apartment. It wasn't at the Arts Center construction site. It was pinging from a residential address. The same address as the condo building where he'd sent the flowers. He wasn't just visiting Serafina, he was living with her. He had literally moved out of our marital home and into his mistress's apartment, all under the guise of needing space. The lie was so complete, so all-encompassing, it was almost impressive in its villainy. I took screenshots of everything: the location data, her posts, his likes, the financial statements. I organized them chronologically in a file, creating a visual timeline of their relationship. The web of deceit was intricate, but I was patiently untangling every thread. During this time, I had to play the part of the concerned, trusting wife. Julian would call every evening, his voice full of fake sincerity. "It's so hard being away from you, Ari," he'd say, "but I think it's working. I'm getting so much clarity." "I'm glad, Julian," I would reply, my voice even, my words honey-laced poison. "Take all the time you need. I'm right here for you." Each phone call fueled my resolve. He thought he was playing me, but he was the one being played. He was so confident in his lies, so certain of my gullibility, that he never saw me coming. He was the architect, but he had no idea that I was studying his flawed blueprints, identifying every weakness, every structural vulnerability. And I was preparing to bring the whole rotten building down on top of him. With my USB drive full of irrefutable evidence, the question was no longer if I would confront Julian, but how. A quiet conversation over the dinner table wouldn't suffice. A tearful showdown in their apartment felt beneath me. He had orchestrated a grand deception. My response needed to be equally grand. He had humiliated me privately. I would expose him publicly. He was an architect who prized his reputation, his image of integrity and vision, above all else. That was his foundation, and that's exactly where I would place the dynamite. I met Isabel at a small, out-of-the-way cafe, far from any neighborhood Julian might frequent. I slid the USB drive across the table. "This is everything," I said, my voice low and steady. "Financials, photos, location data, it's all there." Isabel plugged it into her laptop. As she clicked through the folders, her expression shifted from grim to astonished. "Ari, this is meticulous. He used company funds, and he's living with her. The sheer arrogance of this man." She looked up at me, her eyes blazing with protective fury. "What's the plan? We could send this to a divorce lawyer right now and be done with it." "A divorce is a given," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. "But it's not enough. He didn't just break our vows, he committed fraud. He used his company, Starkwell and Associates, as his personal piggy bank to fund this affair. He lied to me, and he lied to them. I want more than just a settlement. I want accountability. I want everyone to see him for who he really is." A slow smile spread across Isabel's face. "I like where this is going. So, what's the stage for this grand performance?" "The grand unveiling of the Northwood Arts Center," I said. "It's in 3 weeks. It's the biggest night of his career. His bosses, the city council, major clients, his family, everyone will be there. He's giving the keynote speech." Isabel's eyes widened. "Oh, Ariana, that is deliciously brutal. I love it." The plan began to take shape right there on a cafe napkin. It would be a multi-pronged attack, designed with the same precision Julian applied to his blueprints. I would become the architect of his downfall. Phase 1, financial freedom. The first step was to protect myself. Isabel connected me with a sharp, discreet divorce attorney she knew through a friend. Her name was Ms. Davies, a woman who radiated competence. I met with her and laid out the entire case, presenting my evidence. She was impressed. "This is comprehensive," she said, peering at me over her glasses. "The fraudulent expense reports are particularly damning. This moves beyond a simple infidelity case." We worked together to quietly separate my finances. I opened a new bank account at a different bank. I moved my personal savings and the income from my freelance work into it. I systematically canceled any joint credit cards after paying off my portion of the balance, ensuring my credit score would remain untouched. I became a ghost in our shared financial life. Phase 2, the narrative. I needed to control the story. Julian had built a narrative of being a devoted, if stressed, husband. I would dismantle it with the truth. My graphic design skills became my primary weapon. I started designing a portfolio. It wasn't a portfolio of my work, but of his betrayal. Using a clean, professional layout, mimicking the style of Starkwell and Associates' own marketing materials, I created a series of presentation boards. Each board detailed a different aspect of his deceit. Board 1, the timeline. It started with the date he asked for space and mapped out their entire affair using screenshots of Serafina's posts, geotagged locations, and his phone's location data. Board 2, the financials. This displayed the highlighted credit card statements, showing charges for hotels, flowers, and lavish dinners, next to the corresponding fraudulent expense reports he had submitted to his firm. I even created an infographic that calculated the total amount of company money he had misappropriated. Board 3, the lies. This was a collection of screenshots of his text messages to me, full of loving words and lies about working late, placed side by side with photos of him and Serafina from the S. AIM nights. "Miss you so much, stuck at the office," one text read, right next to the picture of him at the art gallery with his arm around her. I didn't want a messy, photocopied mess. I wanted it to look like a professional exhibit. I had the boards printed on high-quality foam core. I also designed a small, elegant booklet that summarized the information, complete with a QR code that linked to a private, password-protected website I built, which hosted all the evidence in high resolution. It was my masterpiece of revenge. Phase 3, the logistics. For the final 2 weeks, I lived a double life. To Julian, I was the patient, loving wife, waiting for him to come home. We had our nightly phone calls where he fed me more lies and I fed him false reassurances. He told me how excited he was for the Arts Center unveiling, how he wished I could see what he had built. "Oh, I'll be there," I told him, a promise dripping with hidden meaning. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The day before the event, I put the final pieces in place. I packed my personal belongings from the house, my clothes, my design equipment, sentimental items. I hired a moving service for the next day, scheduled to arrive an hour after the event was set to begin. I wrote a letter to his parents, whom I had always adored, explaining what I had discovered and what I was about to do. I didn't want them to find out in such a public way, but I couldn't let them continue to believe their son was a man of integrity. I would have it messengered to them an hour before the keynote. Isabel was my co-conspirator, my rock. "Are you sure you can go through with this?" she asked the night before, her voice laced with concern. We were sitting in my nearly empty studio, the presentation boards leaning against the wall like silent soldiers. I looked at the boards, at the cold, hard proof of his betrayal. The pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was now overlaid with a steely resolve. "He designed our life, Isabel," I said, "and then he designed its demolition. All I'm doing is showing everyone his work." I was no longer the grieving wife. I was a client who had been delivered a fraudulent product. I was an artist preparing for my own exhibition, and the grand unveiling was going to be a night no one, especially Julian, would ever forget. The night of the unveiling was electric. The Northwood Art Center was truly Julian's triumph. It was a stunning piece of modern architecture, a symphony of glass, steel, and light. The main atrium was filled with the city's elite, politicians, philanthropists, artists, and of course, the entire senior partnership of Starkwell and Associates. The air buzzed with champagne-fueled chatter and admiration. It was the absolute pinnacle of Julian's career, the perfect height from which to fall. I arrived alone, dressed in a simple, elegant black dress. I was a specter at the feast, moving through the crowd unnoticed. My heart was a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. I wasn't nervous, I was focused. Isabel had arrived earlier, my booklets stashed in a large designer tote bag, looking for all the world like a stylish guest. She gave me a subtle nod from across the room. The boards were in my car, ready for their debut. I saw him holding court near the main stage. He was radiant, glowing with success. He wore a tailored tuxedo, his smile dazzling, his hand resting possessively on the small of Serafina's back. She was in a shimmering silver dress, looking every bit the proud partner. They looked perfect together, a fact that sent a surprisingly small pang through my chest. The pain had been replaced by purpose. They were laughing with Mr. Starkwell himself, the firm's founding partner, an imposing man in his late 60s. I watched them for a moment, observing the scene like a director before the first take. This was the tableau I was here to shatter. The plan was simple. Julian's keynote was the evening's main event. He would be introduced, take the stage, and begin his speech about vision, integrity, and building strong foundations. While he was speaking, Isabel and I would work in tandem. She would quietly place a booklet on every single table in the atrium. My job was more direct. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. Mr. Starkwell took the stage and delivered a glowing introduction, praising Julian as the future of architecture, a man of unwavering integrity and creative genius. I had to suppress a bitter laugh. Julian walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. He beamed, soaking it in. He approached the podium, where his presentation was preloaded on a large screen behind him. "Thank you, Mr. Starkwell," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "To build something that lasts, you need more than just steel and glass. You need a vision, you need trust, you need a foundation of honesty." That was my cue. While all eyes were on him, I moved. I walked calmly, purposefully, to the side of the stage where the audiovisual technician was stationed. He was a young man, completely engrossed in the speech. Before I left the house, I had swapped out the USB drive containing my evidence with an identical-looking one I knew Julian kept in his desk drawer. I held Julian's real USB drive, the one with his actual presentation, in my hand. "Excuse me," I said to the tech, my voice calm and authoritative. "Mr. Starkwell sent me. There's a glitch in the final slide. Julian gave me the updated file." The tech, flustered and eager to please, barely glanced at me. "Oh, okay." He took the drive I offered him, my portfolio of lies, and plugged it into his console. "Which slide?" "Just run the presentation as is," I said. "It's all been corrected." I turned and walked away just as Julian was hitting his rhetorical stride. A foundation that can weather any storm, that stands as a testament to the integrity of its creator. On stage, he clicked the remote to advance to his first slide, an elegant rendering of the Arts Center. But that's not what appeared on the massive screen behind him. Instead, a title card flashed up in the crisp, clean font of his own firm. "The Architecture of a Lie, a Case Study by Julian Croft." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. Julian froze, his smile faltering. He stared at the screen, his face draining of all color. He frantically clicked the remote again. The slide advanced. It was my timeline. A picture of our wedding day on the left, and on the right, the gallery photo of him with Serafina. Dates were clearly marked. The crowd gasped. He kept clicking, his panic growing. The next slide showed the hotel bills next to the fraudulent expense reports. Then came the screenshots of his texts to me, juxtaposed with photos of him and Serafina on their weekend getaways. By now, Isabel had made her rounds. On every table, guests were picking up the glossy booklets, their faces a mixture of confusion, then shock, then disgust. They were flipping through the pages, seeing the same evidence that was now being projected 10 feet high behind the man on the stage. The QR code was a masterstroke. I could see people pulling out their phones, their faces illuminated by the glow of the screen as they accessed the full repository of his deceit. Julian was speechless, paralyzed. He looked out at the sea of faces, no longer looking at him with admiration, but with pity and contempt. He saw his boss, Mr. Starkwell, whose face was a thundercloud of fury. He saw his parents in the front row, his mother's hand flying to her mouth in horror. And he saw Serafina, who was looking at the screen, then at him, her expression curdling from adoration to pure, unadulterated rage. She realized in that instant that his lies weren't just for me, they were for her, too. He wasn't the powerful, divorced architect she thought he was just a common, cheating husband. Finally, his eyes found mine. I was standing at the back of the room, near the exit. I didn't smile. I just held his gaze, letting him see me, letting him see that I was the architect of this moment. Then I did one last thing. I walked to the edge of the stage, took the 4 presentation boards I had brought in from my car, and simply propped them up against the stage for all to see up close. The timeline, the financials, the lies, and a final board with a single, enlarged photo of him and Serafina, under which I had printed his quote, "A foundation of honesty." His public triumph had become his public execution. The silence in the room was broken only by the sound of Serafina slapping him, hard, across the face, before turning and storming out of the atrium. I didn't stay to watch the rest of the fallout. My work was done. With my head held high, I turned and walked out of the arts center, leaving Julian alone on the stage, illuminated by the glaring evidence of his own lies, his perfect world shattered into a million pieces around him. I didn't look back. As I walked out into the cool night air, I felt a profound sense of release, as if a tremendous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The moving van was already parked outside his house when I drove past. My belongings were being carefully loaded, my past being packed away into boxes. I drove to the small, charming apartment I had already leased, a place with old wooden floors and a big bay window perfect for a design studio. It was all mine. The fallout from the grand unveiling was immediate and catastrophic, just as I had designed it to be. Isabel kept me updated. The event ended in chaos. Julian was fired the very next day, not just for the affair, but for the demonstrable fraud against the company. Starkwell and Associates issued a public statement distancing themselves from him, citing a gross violation of the company's code of conduct. His name was scrubbed from their website, his magnum opus, the Arts Center, now credited to the firm as a whole. He was a pariah in the architectural community he had worked so hard to conquer. Serafina, publicly humiliated and professionally implicated, also faced consequences. Her collaboration with Starkwell was terminated, and her own reputation was tarnished by the scandal. Their relationship, built on a foundation of lies, crumbled instantly under the weight of public scrutiny. The last I heard, she had moved to a different city to start over. Julian tried to contact me, of course. Dozens of calls, emails, and texts, alternating between furious tirades and pathetic pleas for forgiveness. I blocked his number and set up an email filter that sent anything from him directly to a folder for my lawyer. I only spoke to him through Ms. Davies. The divorce was ruthlessly efficient. Faced with the mountain of evidence I had, he didn't have a leg to stand on. He didn't fight it. I got the house, which I immediately put on the market, and a generous settlement, more than enough to secure my independence. His parents sent me a handwritten letter. They were heartbroken and ashamed of their son's actions. They apologized for the pain he had caused me and wished me nothing but happiness. It was a small, kind gesture that I deeply appreciated. The months that followed were about rebuilding, not a relationship, but myself. I poured my energy into my work. The story of what I had done, in a strange way, became a calling card. A few of the women who had been at the unveiling, powerful executives and business owners, reached out. They said they admired my strategic execution and bold presentation skills. I landed several major branding contracts, and my little freelance business began to flourish into a proper design agency. I sold the modernist glass house and used the money to buy my little apartment outright and invest in my business. I loved my new home. It wasn't a minimalist masterpiece designed to impress others. It was cozy and warm and filled with things that made me happy. It was a space that reflected me, not a curated image of a perfect life. Isabel remained my constant. We had weekly dinners, celebrating each small victory. "To designing your own life," she toasted one night, clinking her wine glass against mine. "The best kind of architecture." One afternoon, about a year later, I was walking through the city and passed by the Northwood Arts Center. I stopped and looked at it. It was still a beautiful building, but it no longer held any power over me. It wasn't a symbol of my pain or his betrayal anymore. It was just a building, a project I had closed the book on. I thought about Julian and the life he had so carefully constructed. He had designed it for prestige, for ego, for a public audience. But a structure without a true foundation is just a facade destined to collapse. I looked down at the new sketchbook in my hands, its pages clean and white. I was the architect of my life now. I was building something smaller, perhaps, and less grand, but it was honest. It was strong. It was mine. And as I turned and walked away from the monument to my past, I smiled. The blueprints for my future were mine to draw, and I was just getting started.